I want to talk a little bit about apostasy. Falling away is what that word means. Apostasy is an ever-present danger. It's always something we face, something God's people have always faced. In 1 Corinthians chapter 10, Paul the Apostle is speaking about the apostasy, the falling away of the children of Israel. This is during their time in the wilderness. Notice what Paul says. He stresses the word all. Moreover, brethren, I do not want you to be unaware that all our fathers were under the cloud. All passed through the sea. All were baptized into Moses in the cloud and in the sea. All ate the same spiritual food. Everybody shared in the same blessings. But with most of them, God was not well pleased. All of them had the same advantages. All of them received the same blessings. All of them were the church of God. But with most of his church, he wasn't well pleased. And he goes on to say that the proof of it was the fact that their carcasses were lying in the wilderness. They died in the wilderness, and that was a demonstration of God's unhappiness with the book of his people. And that's put there for us so that we'll learn today. It was a falling away that occurred at that time, and Paul said, now these things have become our examples, to the intent that we should not lust after evil things as they also lusted. God had Moses to record that event for us so that we wouldn't make the same mistake they made, that we wouldn't lust after the world like they lusted after the world. Keep in mind, these were God's people. This was his church in the wilderness. And with most of it, he was unhappy. Verse 11, Paul said, now all these things happened to them as examples, and they were written for our admonition, upon whom the ends of the ages have come. That word admonition there actually means gentle or friendly reproof, a criticism or warning about behavior. Now all these things happen to them as examples, and they are a warning for you and I today, that we not repeat their mistakes. Now remember what he said. All of them were the church of God. All of them had the same blessings. Most of them were unable to make God happy, and because of that, their carcasses lie in the wilderness. Now God has given us that record so that we would know that we would not repeat the same mistakes that they made. We can avoid the mistakes they made if we will. But it's imperative that we do, because we can apostatize as they did if we're not careful. We've all read Matthew 7:13 and 14, as well as in many other places, that ultimately only a few are going to go to heaven in comparison to the many. When John saw the few in heaven, he said it was a number that no man could number. But when you compare it to the hundreds and hundreds of billions of people that have lived through the ages, the number, the few, is going to pale in comparison to those whose carcasses will lie in the wilderness. I don't want to be among the few. I know I might be, but I don't want to be. I'm a member of Christ's church. Okay, that's good. But that doesn't mean I'm going to go to heaven. I go to church whenever the doors are open. That's good. But that doesn't mean I'm going to heaven. I study God's Word. I pray when I go home, and that's good. But that doesn't mean I'm going to go to heaven. All of them had the same opportunities and blessings, but with most of them, God was not happy. Now, I wrote this record so that you would have it, so you could know that you would not repeat the same mistake. With most of them, God was not well pleased. What about us today? Here we are. How many of us today, right now, are approved of God? If Christ came right now, how many of us go with Him? And how many remain behind? It's something to think about, really. Hopefully, we're all ready to go. But only I know whether I'm ready to go. Only you know whether you're ready to go. And even though we're a member of the church, there is the possibility that over time we have apostatized. And we may not even be aware of it. We may not even know it. And that's what's frightening. The new birth is something that you and I are familiar with. We were born of flesh. We understand and we know that. We had to be born of the Spirit. Jesus taught that in John chapter 3 and verse 5. Unless one is born of water and the Spirit, he cannot enter the kingdom of God. Okay? Now that's not that difficult to do. I believe that Jesus is God's Son. There came a time in my life when I was willing to change the way I lived and to try to walk with Him the rest of my days. I repented. And then in a matter of a couple minutes, I was immersed in water for forgiveness of sins. Okay? That's not that difficult. But from that time forward, Jesus said, John, be faithful unto death, and I will give you a crown of life. There comes the hard part, right there. It could be 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 or more years that I'm to walk with the Lord. Well, how am I doing? Do I walk faithfully? Do I walk like I once walked? One of the things I do a lot is compare myself today to what I was when I was first converted. When I was first converted to Christ, I remember how I felt about it. I remember how I felt about being a Christian. I remember how I tried to do the things I thought I was supposed to try to do as a Christian. I remember I wanted to do better than I was doing. I remember I had a lot of faults, but I wanted to improve myself. And I tried to. I worked at that. I remember making personal goals where I could improve year by year by year. I remember those feelings. Well, how do I feel right now? Do I still have the same desire that I had then? Am I still as anxious as I was then? Am I still as determined to be successful as I was then? Or have I cooled off? Have I increased, as Ted said, am I more so than I was then? Or am I less so? I know my feelings inside of me. You know your feelings inside of you. And we know how we're doing in comparison to what we've done in the past. This is the hard part. Being faithful unto death. That's when it really gets tough. We grow weary of Christian living. We get tired of it. My brother-in-law and I was talking a couple of days ago. Yesterday, I guess it was. There was a bunch of us there. And he said something that got me to thinking. He said firemen and policemen are of a different breed than everybody else. He said they're not like other people, like most people. Firemen and policemen, they get completely into what they do. They don't have a job. Their job is who they are. They get wrapped up in it. When a person becomes a fireman or a police officer, they get in it, hook, line, and sinker. I know these boys over here that runs this volunteer firehouse. You always see them over there messing around with stuff. They'll be over there washing the fire trucks. They'll be over there riding them up and down the road. It seems like they're constantly messing around with those fire trucks. And I was thinking that I would hate to spend so much of my time fooling with those fire trucks. But those guys, they seem to thoroughly enjoy what they're doing. They're volunteer firefighters, and they are committed to what they do. And you can tell it. Every time you go by, you see them most of the time out there piddling with it. Well, how do we do as Christians? Are we as enthusiastic? Are we as committed? Are we as involved as a Christian to the Lord and His church as firefighters and police officers are to their vocations? Are we as committed to our vocation as they are to their vocation? And if not, why not? Why am I not as wrapped up in my Christian lifestyle as they are in their vocations? Maybe I've gotten tired of Christian living. Maybe it's gotten old to me. Maybe I don't enjoy it. I may not enjoy going to church. It may not mean anything to me. I may, sometimes on Wednesday, not so much now, but used to when I had a job, I'd come in from work and I'd be so tired, and I didn't feel like going to Bible class. I didn't want to go to Bible class. To tell you the truth, what I really wanted to do was sit in my recliner and watch the TV and fall asleep because I was tired. But I believe the Lord wanted me to go to church, so I got ready and I'd go to church. I didn't always want to, but I did it anyway because I knew the Lord expected me to. There are times when we just don't feel like doing what the Lord would have us to do. There are times when we don't really want to get involved. We don't want to be involved. A fellow told me one time he didn't want to commit to a weekly responsibility in the church, and the reason was because if he took a notion to go somewhere, to go to Florida or go off to Missouri or wherever, he wanted to be able to go. And if he committed to a weekly responsibility in the church, he wouldn't be able to do that. What about me? Am I committed to the Lord and His church, or have I gotten tired of it? Is it just something I do? Am I going through the motions? It's something to think about, because it's very possible that I may have apostatized already. I may have fallen away. I may be here physically, but my heart isn't. My heart isn't in it anymore. Go to church because that's what you're supposed to do. You go to church. What do I do in the arena of trying to help other people? What do I do in the area of trying to exhort, edify, admonish, encourage my brothers and sisters? What do I do for others? Or do I even want to do anything else for others? Do I even think about doing something else for others? Does it even cross my mind? You know, if we've been Christians 10, 20, 30, 40, 50 years, and if we don't have any more enthusiasm about us than that, then something has gone terribly wrong. Something has gone terribly wrong. And if the Lord were to come back right now, with all my heart, I believe if I were in that condition, He'll leave me behind. He won't take me with Him, because I've fallen from where I once was. I used to be better than I am now. I used to at least care more than I do now. But that's all gone up in smoke. It's somebody else's problem. An elder one time taught a Bible class, and he taught one for years. 10, 15 years, I suppose. And he quit teaching a class. And I asked him, I said, why don't you teach a Bible class? He said, I did my duty. I said, what do you mean? He said, well, my kids were in Bible classes. I taught a Bible class. Now that they're all out of Bible classes, let somebody else do it. This was an elder of God's church that made that statement. A man with 10 or 15 years experience could easily walk out of a Bible class and put someone in there with no experience whatsoever. And that didn't trouble him at all. With all the accumulated knowledge, he had taught his final Bible class. And he claimed to be an elder of God's people. He didn't have the heart of one. He didn't have the heart of one. I don't know that that would be called the heart of a Christian. I don't believe it would. The word weary means bored, annoyed by something because you've seen it, heard it, done it. Many times or for a long time. Been there, done that. I've heard it before. I know it. I know a person told me one time they didn't need to go to Bible study because they could study their Bible at home. Well, if you know the Bible that well, why don't you go to Bible study and teach somebody else? You see, it's all about me. It's all about me. I can take care of myself at home. I can take care of me and BR at home. And we can stay home and we can do just as good as you are going to do up here. What about our responsibility to you? Isn't that what the Bible teaches? Hebrews 10 and 24, doesn't it say, let us consider one another, to prod one another unto love and to good works? Isn't it my responsibility to try to exhort you? I can't do that when I'm at the house. I may be at the house and studying the Bible. And I may be praying to God. And it all is well. But what am I doing for somebody besides myself? The Christian religion isn't a selfish religion. It's a religion of the second mile. It's a religion that's not all about me. It's about me becoming a servant to you. It's not about making sure I've covered my bases. I'm supposed to be trying to help you cover yours. Yeah, but I get tired of it. I get tired of going to church. Well, I do too. But you go anyway. I used to get tired of going to work. But I went to work. And one time, a fellow told me one time, said, I got to, you won't get paid if you don't go. I don't know how much money you make, but I don't believe that your employer pays what the Lord pays. Sometimes I'm not sure we understand that the Lord fires us too. But He can and does. I'm still my brother's keeper. I'm still my brother's keeper. No matter what I can do to take care of me and my BR, I'm still responsible for you. And if I don't understand that, or if I don't appreciate that, then I've got a big problem. If I'm not mistaken, that's the second command. The second, next only to loving God first. But maybe we've fallen away. Huh? Maybe we've fallen away. Maybe we're not where we once were. Maybe we've drifted. That's why God wrote about the Israelites in the wilderness. We can read, and we watch them as they drift. They drifted away. And you can see them drifting away from God because we've got 20/20 hindsight. And we can watch them drift. And the Lord left them in the wilderness. I don't want to be left. When the Lord comes, I don't want to be left behind because that's no place to be. Paul said, let us not grow weary while doing good. Let us not get bored or annoyed by doing those good things the Lord would have us to do. Just keep on going at it. Keep on doing it. Don't grow weary with it. For in due season we shall reap if we do not lose heart. If we lose heart, we don't reap. At least not what we want. But if we lose heart, if we let it slip, we've got problems we can't live with. The Christian life, it's about what I can do to help you, not just what's in it for me. And I'm afraid in the selfish society that we live in, it's hard for many people to break out of that mold and to honestly be concerned about other people, at least enough to get involved. Stand on the sidelines and cheer other people on, yeah. But personally get involved, that's not the world we live in. We live in a very selfish world. And it may have carried over into the church as well. There's reasons why people grow weary. Number one, an unrealistic view of Jesus Christ. People think of Jesus as this sweet, loving person that's going to embrace everybody and take them to heaven with them. That's the way he's viewed. He's viewed as the person that everybody liked when he was in the world. He said, the world hates me. The world hates me. The church hated him. The church hated Jesus. Doesn't that sound strange? The church hated Jesus. Why? Because of what he required of them. What he expected them to do. And a lot of people have an unrealistic of who this man actually is. Some have an unrealistic view of conversion, what conversion is. Conversion is being perfect. If we say that we have not sinned, we make him a liar, and his word is not in us. When we're converted, some even teach it. We don't sin. The spirit doesn't sin. The body does. The body's designed to sin. It's animalistic. It's got inclinations. It's got lust. The body does what the body does. It's got nothing to do with the spirit. We don't really sin, and we're not going to be accountable for it. And sometimes people grow weary. Some grow weary because they're not perfect, and they think, I ain't going to make it anyway. Why try? Sometimes people grow weary because of neglect. They neglect their religion. Listen to what the author of Hebrews wrote. Therefore, we must give the more earnest heed to the things we have heard, lest we drift away. You know what he's saying? We've heard the message of Christ. We got in, we were excited, we were happy, and now we've been there for a little while. Now what we got to do is give the more earnest heed. Instead of sitting back, instead of relaxing, instead of thinking we've got it whipped, we need to give the more earnest heed to the things we have heard, lest the things we heard slip away from us. They become meaningless. They don't mean anything anymore. We go through the motions. We go to church. We eat the Lord's Supper. We write a check. We give our money. Then we go home. Then we come back the next week and we do that church stuff all over again. We neglect what we're supposed to be doing. If the word spoken through angels, the demonstration of the Old Testament, if what the angels said brought about swift destruction for disobedience, if the words that were spoken through angels proved steadfast, if every sin, every disobedient act was punished by God, he asks, how shall we escape the divine punishment if we neglect this great salvation that's been given to us? He doesn't say abandon it, does he? He says neglect it. Take it for granted. To give it little thought. To not be involved. To neglect. How shall we escape the divine judgment? People in the Old Testament couldn't escape the divine judgment. How will we escape divine judgment if we neglect the salvation offered through God's own Son? You know what he's saying is, we can't escape it. There is no way. If people of the Old Testament era were punished for their disobedience, if God's church was punished in the Old Testament era for their disobedience, how much worse would be our punishment if we reject the Son of God? I suppose it would be 10,000 times worse, because our sin would be that much greater than theirs could have been, because we rejected God's own Son. Sometimes we grow weary because we love the world. That's easy to do. We're told not to do that. John said, if anyone loves the world, then the love of the Father is not in him. One time, we had a little game. I don't know what it's called, but you know them little games they got on the TV set? And we had this game. It was about a race cars. And you could sit there with that little control and you could race that car on the TV. And I loved that game. I would wake up in the middle of the night and I'd get up and play that game. I don't know how many times I was late going here, there, even to church services, because I was in the middle of playing that game and I didn't want to lay that controller down. I enjoyed that game so much. And then one day it dawned on me, man, I like this thing too much. I wasn't going to see Mom and Daddy like I ought to because I was playing that game. I wasn't fooling with BR and the kids like I should. I was playing that game. I wasn't studying the scriptures like I ought to because I was playing that goofy game. And the day came when I quit. I just stopped. And I never played that game again. I fell in love with the world and the things of the world. And that became very important to me. I know what it's like to love the world. I've done it. It's easy to do. Things of the world become more important to us than the things of God. Watching a television show becomes so important, I don't want to miss it to go to church. Well, now we can tape it, so that's not as much of a problem as it used to be. But sometimes we enjoy the world so much that we don't have time to be with the church. Well, I mean, we don't have time to engage in social activities with the church, because that's not, let's face it, that's not where our heart is. Our heart's somewhere else. Our heart belongs to something else. That's not what we're really interested in. It's not about being with the church. It's not about edifying the church. It's not about exhorting the church. It's about me. It's about me doing the things that I like. Because, hey, it's my life. You know, I work hard. And I want to play hard. And I don't have time for that stuff. And I'm not going to devote myself to other people. Not at that price. John said if anyone loves the world, the love of the Father is not in him. We have to choose Either it's going to be God and man, or it's going to be the world. It can't be both. And unfortunately, sometimes the world wins out. It has in my life. It has in my life. Fortunately, I caught it before it went too far. Sometimes people fall away because of too little association with Christians. Evil company corrupts good habits. You know, good company perfects good habits. It has the same effect. If we run with the wrong people, their attitudes will rub off on us. Their way of thinking rubs off on us. But if we run with the right people, their way of thinking rubs off on us. We become somewhat like they are. It has the same effect, whether it's good or whether it's bad. And then Paul said, awake to righteousness. Awake to righteousness. Do not sin, for some do not have the knowledge of God. They can't understand the principle. And I speak this, he said, to your shame, because you don't understand that yet. There's a lot of reasons why people grow weary. Sometimes they're seduced by false teaching. We talked about that a little bit in our Bible class this morning. Some people are very good talkers. Peter said it will be in the church that many will follow their destructive ways, the way of the lie. Because whom the way of truth will be blasphemed. By covetousness they will exploit you with deceptive words, good talkers. I've heard a lot of preachers that are good talkers, convincing, persuasive. I wish I'd pay money to be able to speak like they speak, because they could almost sell anything you could think of. They're so good with words. And there are some who grow weary of the truth because the lie that they've heard is so much more appealing. That happened to our great-grandmother Eve, wasn't it? Yeah, it was her. She was deceived by a slick talker who offered her what she wanted. Sometimes people grow weary because of persecution. It's difficult to be a member of the Church of Christ. As a matter of fact, it's so difficult that some people have no association with the designation Church of Christ whatsoever. They don't want to be associated with the Church of Christ. They call themselves the church or the community church. What about, are you a part of the church? No way. We're not a part of them. Sometimes because of persecution, people grow weary. And they don't want to walk that walk anymore. And they change their walk. The Lord said, if they persecuted me, they're going to persecute you. It's not so bad being hated by the world. They hated Jesus, and when the world hates me, that's an indicator that maybe I'm like him. Maybe we got something in common with each other. I don't know, perhaps. Exposure to unkind brethren causes people to grow weary. Some people in the church, and I'm sad to say, are mean. They're mean people. They're mean. They got a mean heart. They got a mean spirit. And they're brutal. They're brutal. When they talk to you, they speak brutally. They draw blood when they talk. That's because they're not kind people. They don't have a kind heart. Do they know the truth? Yeah, they know it. I mean, anybody can just about read the Bible and understand it. It's not really that hard. They know the truth. Yeah, they know it. But when they tell somebody, something, they're oftentimes brutal. Well, what they say was the truth. Well, yeah, it was true, but you didn't have to poke out his eyes in the process. I mean, sometimes people are so brutal, and that's because they're mean. They got a mean heart. They're not kind. They don't like people. It's not about trying to convince somebody or prick the heart as to what the truth is. It's about trying to skin somebody. I'm going to draw first blood. And they're mean. And some people grow tired of it. They grow so tired of it that they just can't take it anymore. And they fall away. Sometimes people are wounded by church difficulties. We were talking about that in Bible class this morning. For the church to follow the divine pattern, we would have to change the way we do things. But for us to change the way we do things would probably cut the church in half, because too many people in our culture are not conditioned to live by the truth of God's Word. And it's been so long since the pattern's been followed that in order to get back to it, it's going to be exceedingly difficult. And when problems do arise, some people grow weary. They can't handle it, and they'll drift away. And then, of course, some people have misplaced confidence. They put their trust in a person. I've done that. Boy, I've done that. I put my trust in a preacher one time. Man, I thought that guy hung the moon. And then I found out he tried to get me fired at work. It broke my heart. He taught me a lot while we worked together. He taught me so much. And then one day he went for my jugular, and it broke my heart. I've had preachers that taught me in school. Seems like I've gone to school all my life. And I've had a lot of preachers that have taught me. And since the time of our association, some of them now, one I know is a drug addict. He peddles in drugs and stuff. One, or more than one, several actually, now teach false doctrine. And they do so very publicly. Several have apostatized. They've just left the church altogether and gone into business. And as these giants, at least they were giants in my eyes, as these giants fall, it always takes a hunk of me with it. It makes me very sad. And sometimes we're wounded badly, maybe too badly, and that causes us to fall away. I remember a couple of years ago, one of the brethren right here, several preachers in the community over a 2 or 3 year period, several preachers got caught committing adultery. And one who was very well known, I think he might have been the last one that got caught committing adultery. And one man here who today is a brother in Christ, he said, if these preachers can't live the Christian life, how do you think I can? And he believed that. If these preachers can't live the Christian life, how do you think I'm going to do it? Well, he finally learned and understood that they got nothing to do with him. He obeyed the gospel, and today he's a faithful brother, and we're very happy. But it took its toll on him. Sometimes misplaced confidence, thinking a preacher is more than he is, thinking an elder is more than they are, thinking one of the pillars you've known since you were a child was all godliness, and then discovering that it wasn't really the way you thought it was at all. It can be very hard on us, be very hard. But Paul said, do not be deceived, God is not mocked. Whatever a man sows, that he will also reap. He who sows to his flesh will of the flesh reap corruption. But the one who sows to the Spirit, what about him, Paul? That person reaps everlasting life. Do not be deceived. God knows who's who. Let us not grow weary while doing good. For in due season we shall reap life eternal, if we do not lose heart. What about you? Now we've been examining ourselves through this whole thing. What about you? Are you where you are? Are you closer to the Lord than you were when you began your walk with the Lord? Are you closer to the Lord than you were 10 years ago? Are you closer to the Lord today than you were 1 year ago? Are you closer to the Lord than you were 6 months ago? Which way are you going? Are you drawing closer to the Lord, or are you pulling away? You know the answer. God knows the answer. But can you live with the direction you're headed? If not, we hope you'll come while we stand and while we sing.